1798. So in that year, they went in and took the Pope off the throne, if you will, and his political power was then removed. We can find that in many historical references. This is the Encyclopedia Americana. It says in 1798, he, being Berthier, made his entrance into Rome, abolished the papal government, and established a secular one. And so this is in complete fulfillment to what we just read in Revelation 13:3, that told us, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, taken out of power, destroyed, if you will. But this prophecy goes on to tell us, and his deadly wound was what? Healed. This deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. And so this deadly wound that the papacy received, we're told, prophetically, is going to be healed, isn't it? Is it unusual for a deadly wound to heal? Yes, it is. When something is described as a deadly wound, that would be very unusual. It would be miraculous even if that wound would heal. Well, in February 11th, 1929, as we looked through history, we did find that this began to happen. February 11th, 1929, when Mussolini restored statehood to the papal power. And this is an excerpt out of the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper of the time. It says, "The Roman question tonight was a thing of the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy. In affixing the autographs to the memorial document, healing the wound," isn't that interesting? Using almost the same language, healing the wound, extreme cordiality was displayed on both sides. And so that wound, that healing of the wound, began back in 1929. But it's not complete yet, because what we're talking about is political power. What we're talking about will become more and more clear as we go on this morning. Okay, so why the warning about this papal power, this Catholic power? Why is God so adamant about warning us against this beast and about worshiping this beast? Well, as we looked at that beast and how it was made up, it was a composite beast of the different animals. And we went back to Daniel 7. What do we find that the lion represented in Daniel 7? Babylon. That's right. So that first beast was Babylon. Then what was the second beast that came up? It was the bear, right? What did the bear represent? Medo-Persia. And then what was the third beast? The Greece. And what was it represented by? A leopard, right? And we said the reason that this beast in Revelation is a composite beast is because it took elements from all those pagan kingdoms and combined them into a Christian facade. Okay? So in Revelation 13, you've got this composite beast speaking through Catholicism that then takes pagan practices from Babylon, from Greece, from Rome, from Medo-Persia, and it smashes them into this Christian system. And that's very dangerous, because when you take something that is not of God and marry it to the principles of God, you have a pagan institution. And so that's why the warning is so great. And so as we talked about truth and how Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and He also said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall do what? Set you free." How many want to be free? Yeah, we want to know the truth. We want to be set free. We don't want to be deceived. And that's the principle behind this papal power, is that it is about deception. And as we've studied together the subject of the Sabbath, and how this power is responsible for this great change over time of convincing the world that the seventh-day Sabbath is not Saturday, but rather Sunday. We talked about how through Catholicism that people were taught to believe that when you die, you don't really die and wait for the resurrection, but that you live on in some other state. Of course, that's where we get the worship of different saints and praying to Mary and so forth, when you don't really believe that the dead are dead. Then there's the doctrine of hellfire that burns forever and ever, and purgatory, and these other things that are brought through Catholicism that are not biblical. And so really what's happening here is that God's character is being attacked one element at a time. And through these different doctrines, the character of God is made to look so much more hideous than the loving, thoughtful, and just gracious Creator that we serve. We also found that for every truth of God, Satan has a counterfeit. And the word Antichrist in the original language is actually antichristos, and the word anti means instead of. So the antichrist word means instead of Christ. Sometimes people will come to me and they believe that the Antichrist is like the extreme Muslim movement or the Illuminati or all kinds of things, but the principle that we see in the Scripture is that this word, antichristos, instead of Christ, is that it will appear to be good. It will appear to be Christian. It will appear to be everything that people believe that Christ would be like, but rather it's instead of Christ. So it's not going to be blatantly evil as some of these other movements are. It will mirror the life of Christ. It will mirror the things that Christ taught, but it will be twisted. Let me give you an example of that. Just looking at the prophetic elements of the beast itself, have you ever noticed how they ride right alongside of the life of Christ? 7 parallels that I found, and you may be able to find more. The beast we just read about in Revelation 13 is said to begin as it came up out of the water. Remember that? And so the ministry, you could say, of the beast began when it rose up out of the water. Well, the ministry of Christ began the same way. When He came up out of the water, His ministry began in His baptism. They both minister for the same amount of time. 42 months that we just looked at for the beast is exactly 3.5 years. That is exactly how long that Christ's ministry was on the earth. They both are mortally wounded. Christ, of course, on the cross. The beast here we just read about in Revelation receives that deadly wound. Both come back to life. Jesus, of course, on Resurrection Day, on Sunday. And this beast we will find shortly is going to come back to life in a miraculous manner as well. Number 5, they both have horns when we're talking about the prophetic symbol that they represent. Revelation chapter 5, verses 6 and 9, Jesus is described as the Lamb, and it has horns in that prophecy. And we found that this beast has horns as well. Number 7, they both receive worship. Jesus, of course, wanting you to have the choice to worship Him and to worship Him out of a loving response. But the beast, on the other hand, desiring worship, and it's a forced worship that he is after. And number 7, they are both after the world. John 3:16 tells us that God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Well, the beast is after the world too, but in order to destroy the world rather than to save it. So how does the United States fit into all that we've talked about so far? Well, we needed to get a review. We needed to get that first section of Revelation 13 under our belts in order to understand what happens in the last half of Revelation 13. So let's turn there now and read chapter 13, verses 9 through 17. Revelation chapter 13, and we're going to begin in verse 9 now, 9 through 17. Verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in sight of all men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be what? Killed. Verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So here we are introduced to another beast. Who is this second beast? Well, just as we figured out the first one, we're going to take the clues that the Bible gives us and see what we can come up with. Clue number 1, it arose at the right time. Let's look at Revelation 13.